started. I'd like to give you a little introduction to myself. My name is Paul Witt. I'm going to be your moderator for today. I'm the Vice President of North America and Europe for SISA Information Security. As your host for today, it's going to be a great pleasure to take you along with us during a great dialogue between some fantastic payments minds that we have as a panelist. Which is going to be great. At first, a little intro about SISA quickly, just before we jump into the topic of the day. Nothing too in-depth, but I just want to give you some background and a feeling of our level of expertise in this area so that you're comfortable with where we're going with this. So we were founded in 2006. And from the very beginning, SISA has been a forensics-driven cybersecurity firm providing payment and information security assurance services, training, and products to over 2,000 customers across the entire globe. It is our greatest endeavor to take that global footprint and associated knowledge base and feed it into every service, product, engagement that we enter into. And as an authorized assessor for basically anything that begins with PCI DSS, PCI SV, 3DS, P2P, et cetera, et cetera. I could spend the whole 45 minutes rattling off PCI acronyms probably. But the bottom line is that we are one of 4 certified global PCI forensics investigators. And that gives us a unique insight to provide the highest level of services and support to our customer, and allows us, it really compels us actually to have a high level of responsibility to our community, whereas we share that knowledge in webinars like today's. With PCI DSS 4.0 being introduced back in Q1 of 2022, this webinar is going to address the most important security controls, changes, transition timelines, and goals of DSS 4.0 to predominantly address the evolving threat landscape in the payment security space and how important it is for organizations to kickstart their certification journey. And to talk more about this topic, I have a great panel. I'm happy to introduce my co-panelists, Mark Meissner, who's the Senior Vice President of Education and Engagement with PCI Security Standards Council, Lauren Holloway, who's the Director of Data Security Standards at the PCI Security Standards Council, and Adriano Bertoni, who's the Head of North American Delivery for us at SISA and a very long time QSA. So let's jump right into it. The few logistics before we get into it, some things to keep in mind. You will be on mute for the whole conversation today, just so we can avoid some of the unmuting and muting that goes on. Attendees, please put questions in the Q&A section. We're going to address them at the end of the session. It's about a 45 to 50-minute session. We will address all of those questions either on the webinar itself or or afterwards via email. They will all get answered without a doubt, just one form or another that we're going to answer them. So please put in a lot of questions, because what you want to know is exactly what we want to provide for you. Again, just a quick introduction to myself. I am the least important one here on the panel, but I have been in the industry a long time, cybersecurity for about 24 years, and in high-tech startups for close to 30 years, which is a simple way of saying that I'm old. But again, on to the more important panelists here. Mark, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me start by just saying thank you for hosting us. We're excited to present and hear feedback from everyone that's on the call. My name is Mark Meissner. I'm Senior Vice President for Education and Engagement for the PCI Council. My primary responsibility is to ensure that the Council is engaged with our many stakeholders all around the world. We're a global standards body, so we have stakeholders on every continent all around the globe. My primary job and my team is to make sure that we're listening and that we're engaged with our stakeholders, and we're looking forward to the discussion today.
Thanks, Mark. Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Holloway, Director of Data Security Standards at the Council. I've been here for almost 12 years. Part of that, I was with a major payment brand, and I have a bunch of other industry experience part of that as well. My primary responsibility at the Council is PCI DSS. And PCI DSS version 4. So I'm happy to come and talk to you about PCI DSS today.
Great, thanks, Lauren. And now one of my favorite people in the world, Adriano.
Thanks, Paul. So my name is Adriano Bertoni. As Paul said, I've been in the industry since 2008, version 1.2. I have been working with companies where from payment processor, merchants, banks, gateways and all the kinds of assessments through SAQs to level 1s. I'm also qualified nowadays to do card productions and DSS, 3DS assessments as well. And I'm here to help and share some of the inputs from what I've been seeing in the industry today.
Great, thanks, everyone. I'm truly, honestly, I'm truly humbled to be in the presence of these great payment industry minds. I gave you a brief high-level overview of SISA a few minutes ago. Now I'd like to ask Mark to give a similar high-level overview of the PCI Security Standards Council, and that's going to nicely set the stage for our discussion moving forward. So Mark?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. I just want to real quickly talk about the council, what we do, why it's important, and then most importantly, ways that you can engage and participate with us. We're a global collaborative that's really charged with helping to protect payment data. We bring together the best minds in payment security from all around the world to develop standards, programs, and trainings. Probably what makes us different than other standards bodies is that we don't just put out standards, we also put out programs and trainings to help people to implement those standards. And the best way for you to be able to help the industry is by getting involved and being part of our community. Our community, as I mentioned, stretches all around the world, and as payments change, we always need to bring in more and more expertise from companies and that are involved in various forms of payments. We go to the next slide. Our mission is to enhance global payment security through our standards and our programs. That's really built on 4 pillars. One is increasing industry participation, bringing together industry experts and knowledge, evolving our standards. Our standards continue to change, and we continue to create new standards as payment world changes. Secure emerging payment channels. There's always new ways to make payments. We work very hard to stay on top of that. And then also to increase standards, alignment, and consistency. So we're going to go to the next slide. So this is really important. What we do is we put together standards and programs. One area where folks sometimes get confused, we are not in the enforcement business. So we do not enforce compliance of our standards. That is up to usually the acquirer or the payment brands. But just to be clear that we create standards, but we do not enforce them. And I also want to talk about our new level of participation, and this just launched this year. We have 3 levels. We have a principal level, which is designed for those companies that really want to be active with the council at a very advanced level. We have the associate level, which is just our regular participating organizations. We have over 700 of those around the world. And then we created a new category for individuals, and that's for people whose organizations can't necessarily join the council as an organization, but who may have an individual expertise. A professor at a university might come to mind, where the university may not necessarily want to join and participate, but they might have an expertise in payments. So we'll talk a little bit today about the associate level. If we could go to the next slide. So as an associate participating organization, being involved with the council, there's a lot of opportunity. So you get a chance, you can stand for election to our board of advisors, and our board of advisors this year just expanded dramatically as we brought in more expertise to our board. You get a chance to attend our community meetings. I'll talk a little bit about that later. We have 3 major events all around the world during the year. That literally draws thousands of payment professionals. You have the opportunity to join our task force. You have an opportunity to nominate special interest groups. We sometimes put together special interest groups that focus on a specific topic or a specific standard. And then you also have an opportunity to participate in our request for comment process. And that is super important to us. We take our RFC process very seriously. And as we build out our standards and create new standards, the feedback that we get from the industry plays a very big role in the development of all of that. You'll get a chance to expand your knowledge. We put out a lot of information for most of our stakeholders in the area of payments. We are considered the go-to resource. We have a ton of resources on our website, and we put out a lot of resources designed to keep you up to speed with what's going on in the industry. And then you get a chance to promote yourself. People who belong to our organization promote that as that's part of their business strategies, being part of the PCI Council. If we go to the next slide. So I won't go through this long list, but here's the list of the benefits that you get if you become an associate participating organization. Again, I think that one of the areas that probably might be of interest to this group in particular is being able to weigh in on the standards as they're being developed. And if we go to the next slide, I'll give an example of why that was so important. So today we're talking about the DSS version 4. And as that version 4 was being put together, we had 3 requests for comments that went out to our participating organization community. We had over 6,000 comments come back. That came from over 200 unique companies. And so this was really an industry-driven update to the standard. Every one of those comments was responded to, and this is a process we take very seriously. So being involved in the development of standards and being able to have a voice in it is important to you. This is a great way to do that because it gives you a chance to comment as the standard is being developed, and then we take every one of those comments very seriously. We go to the next slide. So our application process, just real quick, if you want to join and be part of our community and work to help the industry, it's a 3-step process on our website. Very simple, take you 5 minutes to sign up. And if you go to the next slide, if you do sign up, you get one of these. I brought mine. I have mine at my desk every day. You can see it's kind of worn already because I don't think there is a single day goes by that I don't use this. It's a really great resource. It's the quick reference guide to the DSS version 4. Wonderful resource to have sitting at your desk, especially if you're on calls all day talking about DSS 4. If we go to the next slide. So we have some upcoming information sessions where you can ask any question you want, and we'll walk through more details about ways to be involved with the council and ways you can participate and make sure that your voice gets heard when it comes to payment standards and programs. You'll see there, if you go to our website, you'll get more details. You can register, but we've got some really great information sessions coming up soon. We go to the next slide. Hope you'll consider joining us today. I know it's a shameless plug, but the more stakeholders that we bring to the table, the stronger we are together as an industry, and it really does help drive and make our standards better. The more people and the more expertise that come to the table. And then the last slide, I just want to remind everyone that we have some really terrific events coming up. We have 3 community meetings every year. One is in North America, one's in Europe, and one is in Asia Pacific. Those are all coming up this fall. And so we're welcoming this year both participating organizations as well as non-participating organizations. So you don't have to be a PO to attend. So if you just want to show up and listen to some really terrific presentations, learn a lot about what's going on in the industry, and network and make friends and make some connections. These are 3 wonderful events to do that. So I hope we can see you soon at one of our events this fall. And with that, I'll turn it back to Paul and turn it over to the panel, which I know everybody came to discuss the DSS 4.
Outstanding, Mark. Thank you so much for that. It's a great backdrop for our discussion moving forward. Now let's get started and talk about some of the meat of the webinar today. In terms of a little bit of the agenda kind of things that we're going to talk about, topics, here are some of the key topics of conversation that we'll drive deep into. We'll start with the specific timelines that are critical to implementing PCI Data Security Standards 4.0. What exactly is the defined approach versus the customized approach? That's a particularly hot topic. Details around some of the future dated requirements, plus some best practices, and also how they apply to the inevitable challenges you will indeed face. And finally, a little bit about why. This evolution of the standard and how it addresses the current payments threat landscape. And to get started, I'd like to ask Lauren to give us a bit of an overview of how we got to this point with the PCI DSS standard, as well as a little more about the PCI standards history as a whole.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I want to start out and say payment security is not just about PCI DSS. We currently have 15 standards and related programs that really support security throughout the payments ecosystem. Now, some of these PCI standards are intended for organizations that are directly involved in payments, such as merchants, service providers, financial institutions, to use within their own environments. And PCI DSS is an example of that. These standards support implementation of secure practices within those environments. And others of our standards are intended for developers, technology vendors, solution providers, et cetera, that wish to demonstrate that their product or service meets a defined set of requirements. This includes standards like our point-to-point encryption standard, PIN transaction security, and our new mobile standards, which have a lot of acronyms in them. It's SPOC, CPOC, and MPOC, software-based PIN entry on COTS, contactless payment on COTS, and mobile payments on COTS. So these product and solution standards really support the validation listing of these products. And you can find these product listings on our website. So all of our 15 standards support a layered approach to security. So that's really important to us. Now this diagram here shows the history of our standards. It started with 2 standards early on. We had PCI DSS in 2006, which was quickly followed by the PIN transaction security point of interaction standard. The blue dots you see are for major revisions or new standards along the way. The orange diamonds show minor revisions, and there's one green star you can see in the upper right corner that represents retirement. Our PADSS standard was retired last October. So our portfolio has expanded over the years to include, a variety of standards that I just mentioned, and also the different types of solutions. So you can really see where we started and kind of where we are now. Go to the next slide.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Lauren. Now let's talk specific timelines, because these are critical and are top of mind for everyone I've talked to in the past year or so. Let's pivot to Adriano. Can you give us a quick view of the timelines and where you're seeing companies currently falling within those timeframes from the field, from what you're seeing on a regular basis, Adriano?
Sure, Paul. So everybody's aware that the release of this standard happened last year. And since last year, I've been working with companies and trying to let them be aware of the amount of time they had to implement or start at least looking for the PCI DSS version 4 requirements and the changes and everything. However, as you guys noticed, so right now we are in August and we only have 7 months until PCI becomes mandatory in April 1st, 2024. Okay. And of course, from there, we still have 26 months that will have all the requirements, the 64 requirements that will make it mandatory by the date of April 1st, 2025. So all the requirements we've been seeing, and we are recommending companies to do a gap analysis, get in contact with your QSAs for recertifications. If it's your first time, the same thing, get a QSA company to assess and to help you, to guide you through the PCI documentation, right? It's a continuously remind to clients to get up to date to the standard. If you are deciding right now to get until March 31st next year to get version 3.1, I highly recommend you having a gap analysis on version 4 with any QSA company as well. That's important when we have many controls that you guys need to be aware of and how those will be validated by the QSA companies.
Thanks, Adriano. And Lauren, what's your point of view on the timelines from the council standpoint?
Well, thanks, Paul. As Adriano mentioned, we're only 7 months away from PCI DSS version 3.2.1 retiring. After that date, then version 4 will become the only active version of PCI DSS. I'd like to point out that we did release this standard in March of 2022, and our intent of releasing it that early was to give people time to understand the changes and the requirements and to really implement the changes within their own environments. We have no plans to change those dates, just so everyone understands that. There are multiple new requirements that Adriano mentioned, and we'll go into a little more detail about those. They are considered best practices until the 31st of March, 2025. And again, we wanted to provide organizations time to implement things. Before this deadline, organizations can include those new requirements if they want to, but they're not required to include those until after that effective date in 2025. Now, I want to clarify what retirement of version 3.2.1 means. From a PCI SSC perspective, it means that version 3.2.1 won't be supported by us anymore. There won't be any more updates or revisions to that version of the standard. Now, what this might mean to an organization, for instance, if you're not done with your version 3.2.1 assessment by that date, is really something that you need to discuss with your compliance accepting entity, whether that's your acquiring bank or whether it's a payment brand. We also have many new and updated transition FAQs. on this topic, a variety of them. So I encourage you to look at our FAQs, which are available on our website, which is pcissc.org. And in the top right corner, you'll see an FAQ button, and you push that, and you can do searches for FAQs.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. So one of the first questions we always get asked when companies are looking at the new standard is, what is this new concept, the defined approach versus customized approach? And that's followed closely, of course, by the questions around future dated requirements. So Lauren, can you start us off and give us some insight to these items?
Sure, happy to. So adding flexibility was one of the goals of PCI DSS. We had 4 major goals for version 4, which I'll talk about in a minute. But for flexibility, stakeholders told us they would like to be able to meet PCI DSS requirements using different methodologies. And as a result of that, we now have 2 options. We have the defined approach and the customized approach that can be used by an organization to meet a PCI DSS requirement. So the defined approach is what organizations have been doing all along to meet PCI DSS requirements. The organization meets the requirement as stated in the standard, and the assessor follows the testing procedures that are written in the standard to confirm that the organization is meeting the requirement. Now, with the customized approach, which is new, this is really intended for organizations with strong security practices that may want to do things a bit differently. In this approach, the organization is responsible to design, document, and implement and test its own controls. And then the assessor will come in and develop their own testing procedures to confirm that those controls are actually met. Now, these controls have to meet the customized approach objective that is stated in the requirement. Now, I will state that this approach is going to be a lot more work for organizations, and it is more work for the assessors as well.
Great clarity there. Thank you. So, Adriano, from the field and the multitude of projects you've been involved in, what trends are you seeing in terms of where organizations are going, defined versus customized approach?
So I've been getting a lot of questions related to when to apply and if that's going to be an option. One thing that is good to remember and clarify as well, the customized approach is not a compensated control. Many customers are asking me if this is a customized approach, is a compensating control. No, and it is not. We still have the compensating control worksheet in the appendix of the PCI DSS standard, and that's going to be used separate when a company cannot achieve the compliance based on the target, or based on the defined approach or a customized approach, right? Some requirements, they don't have the customized approach as well as questions related to about those future date requirements, right? We do have tons of new requirements, around 64 requirements, and which are from those 64, only 13 are immediately effective next year, and that's what I've been seeing from customers. I mean, they are concerned about other questions or other points related to small SAQs like the SAQA, tampering controls, and you guys should be aware again. If you have concern or anything about those new requirements or customized approach, contact your QSA company. You can have the necessary support as well as going through the PCI website. It provides a lot of information, a lot of material that can help you get to your answer easily.
That's outstanding insight, Adriano. Thank you for that. It's kind of a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, of what you're seeing on the field. That's great. Now, Lauren, what about those future dated requirements?
Sure, I'm happy to go into those in a little more detail. We really want to emphasize today, if you get one message out of what I'm saying, is that the time to start is today. If you haven't already begun your journey towards version 4, I really encourage you to get started. There are a significant number of new requirements introduced in version 4. Now, most of these are future dated, which means that they're functioning as best practices until the 31st of March, 2025. So specifically, there are 53 new requirements that apply to all entities. And in addition, there are 11 more new requirements that apply only to service providers. So that's the 64 that Adriano mentioned a bit ago. Most of these new requirements are future dated, but 13 of them are effective immediately for all version 4 assessments. I encourage you to read our summary of changes document, which you can find on our website. This provides a lot of details about all the new requirements, the changes we made. It also includes effective dates for these new requirements and whether they apply to all entities or just service providers, and also which ones are effective immediately for all version 4 assessments.
Great. With all of that fresh in our mind, Adriano, in your extensive history of helping companies navigate the new standard, what are some of the best practices that you're personally using or that you've seen or come across when running these projects?
Thanks, Paul, for that question. That's a good question. Through the years and through all the updates I've been through working for consultant companies that were assessing against PCI DSS, the main thing that we notice is the customers and clients, they don't rely on the QSA company for help. So my points, I kind of have some points to kind of guide you guys that are looking for version 4 right now. This is a new change. It took a while to have this change. PCI, as Mark mentioned, we have a lot of meetings, a lot of program to have the version 4 up to date and the way it is right now. So first of all, download the standard. Go to the website, get the resources. They have a resources pages there, and you can download everything. If you and get through it, get used to it. Go read the change document as well, which will guide you through the main changes from version 3.1 to version 4. Right. Second thing is you do have, again, if you need some help, contact your QSA company. Okay. Don't forget about those. They can help you definitely define a roadmap. They can help you define requirements that need to be mandatory right now for your company from April 1st and plan with you a program to achieve those compliance in 2025 as well. Okay. Other points that I do recommend is double check the applicability of some of the requirements. And as well, prepare for some of the scoping requirements, okay? We do have some part of the scoping requirements, 12.5.2, which is before it was just a recommendation back in the days on 3.2.1. Now we do have a requirement for you to create a scoping. If you don't know how to do, call your QSA and try to use as many tools or any methodology you can with that scoping task that you can perform every year prior to our assessment. Okay.
Great, thanks. And Lauren, any additional advice from your point of view?
Sure. This is a picture of our version 4 resource hub, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute. You can see the URL at the bottom there on our website. This resource hub does include access to you can get to our blog post through this resource hub. And we did publish a blog post in May on 8 steps that you should take on your journey to version 4. So I'll quickly walk you through some of those, but I encourage you to go read the blog post in full detail. So the first step is to really start now. As I said, don't delay. You don't have a lot more time to get ready. You only have 7 months until version 3.1 retires. So that's an important message. And another important message is to stay strong and don't let your version 3.1 controls slip. Continue to maintain and monitor those controls, and they will provide a good baseline for what you need to implement and start towards version 4. And another important point is to really understand the requirements. Read through that summary of changes document to understand all the changes. As I said, it includes all the new requirements and the effective dates, and work with your internal experts to understand how the changes impact your organization. And also don't forget about the guidance column. The guidance column in the standard was updated to include a lot more guidance. Even if you use a self-assessment questionnaire, we recommend people put those 2 documents side by side. For each question you have in your self-assessment questionnaire, read the guidance because it's not in the self-assessment questionnaires, it's only in the standard. And also for QSAs, I encourage you to read the standard because the guidance is also not included in the report of compliance template. And another important point is to choose the right validation, whether that's the defined approach or the customized approach. It's important to understand which one works best for you. And that really depends on your strategy, your approach to risk management, and how much you want to do things differently. As Adriano said, it's important to use trusted partners. Partner with a QSA. We also have solutions you could use. As I said on our website, we also have the PCI professional certification, as well as the internal, sorry, forgetting my acronyms, internal security assessor, which are both great ways to increase your knowledge about the PCI, various PCI standards and PCI DSS specifically. And another important point is to really do the work. It's not just an IT project. It's not just a risk project. Communicate across the organization, get people involved in the transition that really need to be involved. And as Adriano said as well, it's important to do your own assessments up front. It's the best way to prepare. It's the best way to understand if you have gaps that you need to address. And then you can work on and address those gaps before time for your assessment. And lastly, we really want to encourage people to prioritize security as a continuous process. Really focus on maintaining your PCI DSS controls year-round. This will help you avoid cycles of short-term compliance followed by security lapses, and then you have to hurry up and remediate before your assessment starts. If you can keep security as a continuous process during the year, you can avoid all that. So again, this information is all on our resource hub. And all our version 4 information can be found there, all of it. The standard, the summary of changes document, quick reference guide is there, all the self-assessment questionnaires, everything version 4 related can be accessed through this resource hub.
Great advice and some really very practical insights there. Thanks. It's really good stuff. But with all of that said, jumping back to you, Adriano, with all of that said, what are some of the challenges organizations are still going to encounter? Whether they use best practices to smooth them over or not, it's inevitable that they will jump into some challenges. So during this journey, what are they going to run into, Adriano?
Sure, Paul. So I've been seeing a lot of questioning about the complexity of the new standard, and I've been guiding them to read, as Lauren said, to read the guidance of the standard itself, which provides a very good amount of information and how those need to be addressed, or how that control must be compliant. One thing that I also noticed is that for all the controls, the complexity, you're going to see that some specific change in the standard now covers more of the scope. So changing in the wording now, which I have customers in the past, like they'll say, no, this is a specific for firewall, so now it's network device, so we can cover a lot of more broad types of asset that does that function. And customers are coming back to me and say, hey, so does that mean that the scope will be increased? Maybe not. So we do need to validate and review. One thing that is important, and I received these questions recently, is to remember that if you're going for version 4 next year after March 31st, remember that you do need to continue to be compliant with version 3.1. Okay, if you're doing a recertification next year after 31st of March, then you do need to be compliant. You do need to maintain your business as usual items. PCI has many items that are recurrent and needs to happen in multiple different frequencies to achieve compliant. Okay, if you don't bring those requirements, those evidence, you're going to be probably failing PCI, and some remediation will take place. Some other points that are important to mention, and one of the main challenges is the target risk analysis that I've been receiving calls from customers as well. So companies lack a little bit of the risk management methodology that was before requirement 12.2. And now you do have target risk analysis for many of the PCI requirements that require a frequency to be executed. So as you can do that, you need to do a risk assessment on that specific requirement to guarantee support your decision how frequency, like a log review, will happen and other points. That's a new thing, and I encourage you guys to look for someone to answer your questions, like a QSA, or even searching on the PCI website for that.
Undoubtedly, it's formidable but clearly achievable hurdles, which is fantastic with the right help. Being cybersecurity professionals, we all know that it's often a game of leapfrog with the bad actors in the world. And so, Lauren, could you give us some insight on how the PCI Data Security Standards 4.0 helps us take that additional leap to address the ever-changing threat landscape within the payments ecosystem?
Sure, Paul, happy to. I'll start out with just talking a little bit about what the goals were for version 4. I referenced some of these as I've been talking. These goals are really shaped by industry feedback and questions we got. And a lot of the answers that we got, or questions we got, have been answered in the guidance and information that we've updated in the standard. So the defined goals of the standard are to ensure the standard continues to meet the security needs of the payment industry. And this is really where addressing the dynamic threat landscape comes into it. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. We also have a strong focus on promoting security as a continuous process, which I just mentioned during the 8 steps to version 4. And another goal was to increase flexibility for organizations that may want to use different methods to achieve security objectives, which is where a customized approach and defined approach come into it. And our last goal was to enhance validation methods and procedures. And what we mean by this is the report and compliance template, the self-assessment questionnaires, the attestations of compliance. All of those have been updated to address version 4 as well. So on the next slide, I have a bit more about how we evolve this standard to meet the security needs. So we did update the standard in multiple ways. And a few of the ways we did it to address the evolving threat landscape is there is a new requirement for multi-factor authentication for all access into the cardholder data environment. We also made updates and clarifications to other authentication requirements, and we added new requirements for how multi-factor authentication systems are implemented. We also added requirements to address 2 common threat areas that we've seen in the industry really impacting merchants and others, and that's phishing attacks and e-commerce skimming. Sure, you've all heard about phishing attacks. The attacker uses false pretenses to get a person to perform an act or to provide information that will ultimately benefit the attacker. And the standard now addresses this with a 2-pronged approach. First, we have a technical aspect that requires processes and automated mechanisms to detect and protect personnel against phishing attacks. And that's a technical requirement. And then because phishing is all about targeting people through communication, there's also a requirement for security awareness training that includes phishing and social engineering. And we also have 2 new requirements to address the e-commerce mage cart type of attacks that have been so prevalent in e-commerce merchants. The attackers use common e-commerce scripts, such as those that might be used for chat or other seemingly innocuous functions, and they use those scripts to upload their own malicious code so that they can capture cardholder information from the consumer's browsers. So we added 2 requirements. The first one is for entities to manage their payment page scripts that are loaded and executed in the consumer's browser, and a second requirement to deploy change detection mechanisms to look for indicators of malicious activity on payment pages. So that's really several of the ways that we've tried to address the dynamic threat landscape that we've seen out there.
Excellent. Really good stuff. Really good insights across the board. Really truly great insights from experts in the field that are out there battling all of this on a regular basis. Now let's take some questions from the audience. If you again put your questions in the Q&A module, and we will try to get to them. We've only got a few minutes. First of all, let's go with this question. With regards to data discovery to be formed at least once every 3 months and upon significant changes to the CDE or processes, what are the good practices to be followed by entities to identify and document the existence of all clear text PAN in their environments and secure account data? I think it's probably for you, Lauren, correct? I think that you'd be best to answer that. That was a mouthful, by the way.
And thanks for that question. And this allows me to clear up something, because we've heard this question before. There is no specific PCI DSS requirement that requires data discovery at least once every 3 months upon significant changes to CDM processes, which is what the question said. But there is a requirement that Adriano referenced, requirement 1252, which requires that PCI DSS scope is documented and confirmed by the entity at least once every 12 months and upon significant changes. Now, this requirement does include a bullet to identify all locations where account data is stored, processed, and transmitted, including any locations outside of the currently defined cardholder data environment. For that requirement, a data discovery tool is mentioned in the guidance column as something that an organization can use to facilitate identifying all those locations and sources of primary account number. It would help look for primary account number in places that an organization may not be expecting, outside of the currently defined cardholder data environment, et cetera. I think it's really important for an organization to have good processes for thorough data analysis, data flow analysis, and to create those data flow diagrams for all payment stages. And then you can take those data flow diagrams once you know where those data, where the data is flowing, and then you can follow up with personnel interviews, maybe observation of what they're doing to really determine how that data is used, and that may allow you to find undetected or unknown sources of that sensitive information. So the bottom line is that data discovery is not specifically required, but for larger entities, it may be difficult to find all locations of primary account number outside of the cardholder data environment without such a tool. But for smaller entities, which is why we didn't specifically require use of a tool, for those smaller organizations, manual processes and methods may be sufficient.
Wow, that was a great question and a great answer for that matter. So here's another good question. Please highlight the top three takeaways for stakeholders from the information supplement, and which is the current SIG that PCI Security Standards Council has been working on. This probably back to you, Lauren, on this one.
So first, I'll talk on the special interest groups, or SIGs as we call them. They've produced many of our guidance papers with the core content provided and contributed by the PCI community. And one example is the one you recommended, which was from our 2021 SIG for guidance for containers and container orchestration tools. So that paper kind of focuses on two areas. There's an explanation of containers, container orchestration tools, what's the architecture, common features, benefits, et cetera. And I think an important point of that is that while container orchestration tools definitely can offer improved security, scalability, and consistency, they can also add complexity, and they may require advanced knowledge of the tools by the people that are implementing them. And this paper also covered threats and best practices for containers and container orchestration tools. And this is really a list of best practices mapped against use cases. So there's use cases with common threats and the corresponding best practices. So there's 42 best practices identified, and those are mapped against the threats and use cases. So I think this paper is a valuable resource for people, that are considering or using containers and container orchestration tools. So I definitely encourage you to seek out that paper on our website. And just a little bit more on SIGs as well. We have a process every year where we submit feedback from our participating organizations. What SIG topics are they interested in? And based on their topic submissions and the votes that they also provide us, our 2023 SIG topic is scoping and segmentation for modern network architectures. And the objective of this SIG is to produce guidance that supports the secure, consistent, and accurate scoping and segmentation practices for modern network architectures. And this is intended to focus on the use of zero trust architectures and multi-cloud implementations. So these SIGs are open to all participating organizations. So if you are a participating organization, you're welcome to join the SIG. You can look on our website under Get Involved and then click on Special Interest Groups, and there will be sign-up information there.
Fantastic. Looking forward to those. I think we have time for just one more question. So here's one. Since the PCI Security Standards Council Board of Advisors is expanding from 31 to 52, how does one get an opportunity to nominate their organization for the Board of Advisors? And when are the next elections due? I think we give Lauren a rest here, maybe bring Mark back into the conversation for this.
Yeah, be happy to answer that. So the simple answer is you first have to be either a participating organization, an associate participating organization, or a principal participating organization. Our Board of Advisors elections happen every 2 years. We just seated a brand new Board of Advisors, so the next election will be 2 years from now. I will say this, though, that for the folks that nominate themselves for Board of Advisors, the ones who get elected have historically been those that have been active in the community for a while. It makes sense because they're better known. So if you are interested in perhaps nominating yourself and running for Board of Advisors or your company, the sooner you can get involved in the community and be involved is better. And I would just say this too, if you want to take a look at who is on our Board of Advisors, that's on our website. We're excited with this group because it's the largest Board of Advisors we've ever had. It is also the most global. You're going to see companies from all over the world on the board. And so we're excited because we've got more expertise and from all over the world more than ever before. So I would encourage you to check out our Board of Advisors on our website.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mark. So with that, I want to thank everyone for being here, being a part of this session. I'm very excited about how this went. I hope there's a lot more questions online. I know in the Q&A session, we will get to those. We will email those answers out. If you want to continue this conversation, again, you can meet us in person and continue the conversation in Portland, Oregon, Dublin, Ireland, in Malaysia, all coming up soon at those community events. With that, I will let you get back to your day and thank you all for attending. Have a great rest of the week.